One of the absolute best ways to win tournaments this time of year is flipping a big weight, okay? So this time of year, that grass is coming up, those bass are living in that grass. And the only way to get after them for the most part is to go in there and find them. So let's break down how to find them, where they're gonna be at in that grass, what to look for, what baits and rods to throw, and how to get them out of there. And what you wanna look for is differences in the grass. And I know that can be kind of vague, but everybody when they look at grass gets just puzzled look on their face because it can look like you're staring into absolute oblivion, right? Everything looks the same, but it doesn't, okay? There's small differences that you need to look for, okay? The differences are gonna be the turns in the grass, the points of the grass, and anywhere you get a good mixture of grass and pockets of grass. So there's always key differences, and it is important to figure out for that time of day in the lake you're on what those differences are going to be that those fish are keying in on. You know, some days they might be in the clumps, some days they might be in the open pockets, some days they might be out on that thick edge, some days they might be on the inside edge. You know, there's an inside versus an outside edge on most lakes, and you need to figure out for the time of year you're in where those fish are going to be. Like I said, it is August, so most of these fish are going to be out on that edge. The water temp right now, I'm looking at it, is 79.4 degrees, so that is going to be a key for those fish to start moving out. You know, the spawn was forever ago. Those fish are looking for food. The bluegill and the bait are starting to go out. There's some still spawning, but where I'm at in northern PA, those largemouth are starting to get out further, and you can even catch some smallmouth on these edges too. The reason that this wins tournaments though is you catch big fish, but not necessarily that you catch big fish. You can catch big fish doing a lot of different things. The real key is that if you find, and when you find a group of fish out in this grass, 9 times out of 10 you will have them completely to yourself. Like I said, they get in groups of like-size fish, and like I've said, it's a needle in a haystack out there, right? There's a lot of grass in most of your lakes. But when you find one, you're gonna have a group of good-sized fish to yourself that haven't seen a bait in a while, so they're gonna eat good. And then there's gonna be no other competitors around you. So especially for you guys fishing 1- and 2-day tournaments, this is gonna set up so good in your wheelhouse. Because if you put a couple days of practice and find one group of fish, you know, you can catch them in practice and you won't deplete the school. So now you can get out there on tournament day and really just have a group of fish all to yourself. They might move around a little bit because it's grass, but it's gonna be perfectly to yourself, and that'll allow you to have a mega sack for those 1-day tournaments especially. So one common question that you always hear is, well, what grass is good grass? You know, and there's really no correct answer, but there's definitely some wrong answers. The best thing to look for is the greenest grass you can find. You know, your milfoil, your coontail, basically anything you can get your bait in and out of easily is a great way to identify good grass. Once you get into some of that stringy grass, that real thin grass, that's gonna be the stuff you're gonna wanna stay away from because it's hard to fish, and most times if it's hard to fish, it's hard for those fish to get around in it. Those fish want something that has openings in it. You know, whether it's completely topped out grass, where you're punching into it, or just flipping the grass on the edges. And one thing that I want to break down is, if you're looking at grass, you know, where do you start flipping it on that edge? Do you start where it tapers off and that grass is completely bare? Or do you start on the inside where you can see it? The answer is, when you're going down a grass edge and you're trying to figure out where it stops, the area you want to start fishing is the area you last see it topped out, okay? That grass will be coming out and then it'll start to taper. Where you want to fish is you want to fish this peak right here where that grass starts to taper and is just topped out, right on that edge. You know, from there, about 6 feet, you know, 6 to 10 feet in, that specific area. And what you want to look for when you're going down through there is little differences in that grass edge. You know, little points, like I said, little turns. Okay, but what you really need to do, and this is where most people fail, is look at what's under the water. And I know that sounds kind of dumb, but what I mean is look at your topographic map. People just go out and they find grass and they say, okay, I found grass, let's start fishing it. What you need to do is act as if that grass is not even there. You need to look at your map, look at your contour lines and say, okay, this is where the grass is, but this is where a point is. This was a spawning pocket. If I follow where those fish were and follow them out onto these main lake points, you know, these main lake drops, something along those lines, basically figure out where those fish would go if there wasn't any grass, and then look at what the grass looks like, right? And obviously that's gonna change when you get there. If the grass looks like crap, you're not gonna wanna fish it. You know, if it's dead, if there's no grass, you're not gonna wanna fish it. But what you wanna really identify is those isolated areas, okay? There's a difference between catching fish in grass and just finding grass and catching big fish in grass, okay? Catching fish in grass can be going down a hard edge. There might be a lot of little fish. But what you can really do if you find isolated clumps away from everything, that's where your biggest fish are going to be. They don't want to compete with the rest of the group, you know, they want to be in like group areas. So if you find a 4-pounder, there's going to be other 4-pounders there. This time of year, they group up by size for the most part. You know, if you're fishing in grass, most oftentimes it's not like the Kentucky lake schools. A lot of times it's, if you catch a 2-pounder, that's pretty much what's there is 2-pounders. If you catch a 4, there's 4s, you know, 4 pluses. That's the size that's going to be there. So that's a little bit about where you're going to look for, the area you're going to want to do it, the grass that you're looking for, and the fish that are going to be there. Let's kind of start breaking down the gear that I'm going to use to go in there and get them. So I have a few different rods that I like to throw for this, primarily 2 of them. So the first one that I like to throw is some sort of 7 to 7.2 heavy action rod, and it's kind of like a heavy, fast action, but it has a little bit of a tip to it. And what I'm going to use this rod for is you don't want to wear yourself out, okay? If you guys are like me, you fish a lot, your shoulders start to feel it after a while, especially if you're flipping a 7-11 heavy action rod all day. It's going to wear on your arm. So you have to put something in your hand that is going to make it easy for you when you're first starting out. So if you guys are first getting out there in the water and you want to try this, pick up a rod that is not going to absolutely tear your shoulder up, because trust me, you will feel it the next day if you just start doing it. I pair that with 30 to 50 pound braid depending on how thick the grass is and what the wind is going to be like. If it's going to be super windy, a lot of times I like to go to that 30 pound braid because I can cut through the grass easier and I can cut through the wind easier, right? But if I'm getting into thicker stuff and it's calmer, I'm going to use that 50 pound because I have a better chance of getting those fish out of there. So this is a 7-2 medium or heavy fast action. I like to pair that with a 7-2 gear ratio reel. This is an 8-2 right now, but the only reason I'm using an 8-2 is to cover a lot of water. The problem with an 8-2 to 1 is you don't have the torque to get those fish out of there. You can still do it, but that 7-2 has more torque behind it, and what I mean by torque is more power to pull those fish out. It's kind of like gears in a truck. You know, the higher your gear, the less pulling power you have. The lower your gear, the more you can pull out of there. So the lower your gear ratio, which is why you see guys using big swim bait reels, those 4 2 to 1, 5 2 to 1s, but we want to be able to cover water, so we're going to use a 7 2 to 1 gear ratio. That is one gear, that is one setup that I use. My main flipping stick is going to be a 7-11 heavy fast action flipping stick. You want something that has more of a moderate bend to it though. All flipping sticks are not equal. What you want to have is basically a super heavy crankbait rod for the most part. Now don't go out and buy a glass rod or anything like that. But what I'm meaning is you want a parabolic bend in that rod. You want that whole thing to load up, not just the tip. You want the whole rod to bend. And what that does is when you set the hook, it'll put that hook in there, but as you're going through that grass, there's going to be pulling and stopping points. You know, you might hit a clump, and if you have a real heavy rod that just barely bends, as soon as they hit that clump, it's going to straighten out and that hook will fall right out of their face. So if you have a parabolic bend rod, what that'll allow you to do is give yourself a little bit of cushion room while you're pulling those fish out, because you want to start reeling and you don't want to stop. But the weights that I'm throwing on these, because the reel is exactly the same on this one, is I like an ounce to an ounce and a half weight. Now if I'm fishing somewhere in that 5-foot range, I'll go to a 3/4, but for the most part when I'm out here deeper, I'm going to be throwing that ounce to ounce and a half because it gets a reaction. So those fish sitting in that grass have a split second to eat the baits that are coming through there. That means bluegill, shad, any kind of bait fish, crayfish, they're sitting in there, and as soon as something flashes in front of their face, they have to make a decision right now whether to eat it or not. And that is the beauty of what a big weight does. As it falls, it just acts like all the other bait that's in that grass, just darting around trying not to get eaten because you're literally lurking in anywhere could be a big fish, right? Most oftentimes, your bites are going to be as simple as you drop it in, you go to pick it back up, and there's something there. What also happens though is as you flip in, those fish are suspended in that grass, and you will watch your line just shoot off, and it'll seem like somebody just cut your line right off because they eat it so fast. For being an ounce and a quarter, an ounce and a half, it sounds intimidating with how heavy it is, but trust me when I tell you it's not. First time I picked it up, I was afraid too, because an ounce and a half sounds super heavy. Literally not. You can't move it fast enough for those fish not to eat it. So I'm pairing that with some sort of beaver style bait. I like some sort of green pumpkin. This is a black and green pumpkin mix because the water I'm on is kind of dirty. I like to keep my bait choices fairly simple though. I'm gonna have some sort of green pumpkin. This is like a green pumpkin purple. And then I also like to have straight green pumpkin. And then I'm gonna go with something that's a little bit darker, whether it's a black and blue. Those are my 2 options. There's really no reason to go anywhere outside of that. You know, it's not like chatterbait colors or crankbait colors where you want all kinds of crazy colors. They're either gonna eat it or they're not. And most times it doesn't even matter whether you're flipping a green pumpkin or a black and blue. The only time that I really change that up is the water clarity. So if it's dirty, first off, I'm probably not gonna be flipping deep grass. So it's really a clear water thing because it really relates to these northern lakes or even your southern lakes where you're just out on those ledges, getting out where those fish are trying to eat out in that grass. So that is the baits that I'm going to use. The hook that I'm going to put that on is I like a straight shank hook. You will hear guys try to use, you know, an EWG style hook, but I really like that straight flipping hook. And the key to that is using one that has a wire keeper on there, because you don't want a plastic one because it'll honestly just crinkle over. That wire keeper just holds that bait a whole lot better. And I'm going to use that in like a 3/0 or a 2/0. So with that straight shank hook, what you can do, and this is what the key to this is, I'll take this bait off so you can really see it. When you set the hook, the first thing that's going to happen is that weight is going to hit the roof of that fish's mouth, right? It's going to hit that fish's mouth first. And if you just tie a normal knot, that hook's going to stay straight and it'll pop that fish's mouth open and you'll end up skin hooking a lot of them and losing a lot of fish. But if you snell knot it, and that's what this is right here, as you see, when that weight falls down, it kicks this hook up. So what'll happen is it'll hit the roof of that fish's mouth and then this hook kicks straight up. You can see how heavy that kicks right up. Okay, turns it almost straight up and down, and that's what's going to do your damage. It's going to put the hook right in the roof of that fish's mouth every single time. So that's why I like to use that specific hook right there. So another great way to win summertime tournaments is fishing docks. Those fish that are living shallow, get up on those docks. That can be a great way to catch a 1-2 day giant sack. So if you really like this video, be sure to comment down below, hit that subscribe button, and also check out this video on why you're not catching fish on docks, where I break down exactly how I fish docks, what I like to fish docks with, and the best ways to catch them. So check that out. Thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and I hope y'all take care.